Congratulations on getting through the exam. I'm making this video actually before the exam, but I trust that you'll all survive. I know that's not a lot of fun, so let's talk about something that is more fun, and that's the BSG Business Strategy Game simulation. Here's what I want you to accomplish by watching these sets of videos. I want you to get familiar with what's going to be expected of you, and in general, how the game's going to work. So, like I said, if you want to print out the student manuals and skim them before you watch these, that might not be a bad idea, but I would encourage you not to dive in too deeply. Let these videos situate you for the simulation, and then I think when you take the time to read, it'll make a whole lot more sense. So the BSG operates in the athletic footwear industry, so you're heading Nike or Adidas or whatever, except unlike the real world where there's only a couple of major retailers, in this, there's going to be 7 major retailers, and that's going to be the 7 teams that are in this class. This is a big part of the course, and so it's a good chunk of your grade. Approximately 25% of your grade is in the simulation, but I think you're going to enjoy it. I won't lie to you, if you are one of those teams that gets stomped, it's not a lot of fun. Towards the end when you can't seem to turn it around, but there's really no reason why anyone should get stomped. So I want you to enjoy this. I also want you to think about this as being a live case. You've done lots of case studies during your MBA program, and now you're going to do a case study, except instead of reading about it in a book, you're actually leading the company, and you're responsible for getting the best performance possible. I've been doing the simulations for several years now, and I am a huge believer in the teaching value of the simulation and its place in the strategy class. And specifically, what I want you to get out of this is you're going to take a lot of the concepts that we've talked about in the class, and you're going to see how they work in the simulation, and you're going to make the decisions. I won't lie to you, the simulation isn't real heavy into finance considerations, so it's not like you'll bring in a whole lot of your finance background, but you'll bring in some of it, and some of your accounting background as you interpret the results and try to figure out exactly what's going on. And certainly your management and marketing is a big part of what we're going to be doing. It's also going to cause you to dive into the details of your business, and that's exactly how I want you to view this. I want you to view this as your business, and so I want you to take your performance personally, because you're all starting out at the same place. Where you end up is a direct reflection of the quality of the decisions that your team made. So you should want to own your performance and do very well. One of the most important learning points for the simulation is that you are continually learning and getting better. And so I think I've already used in the class this, I call it the West Texas School of Management. How we doing, why we doing, and how we going to do better. The how we doing is pretty straightforward, both in this simulation and often in the business world, although certainly you have a lot of transparency as to everybody's performance. The why we doing is a whole lot trickier, and that is the crux. That's what you're going to spend a lot of time looking at your printouts, looking at your competition, trying to answer the question, why am I doing as I'm doing? Either better than I expected or worse than I expected. And then from that investigation, then comes the question, how am I going to do better? And so this is where you say, based on the analysis and what's happened to date, these are some changes I'm going to make for the next year. And you're going to go forward with that. What I really like to see is when firms get in the middle of competition and you can see that they are making little tweaks and little changes, or maybe even big changes because they haven't been doing so well, and they're getting progressively smarter and they're competing more effectively. I've never had a simulation where there wasn't a pretty broad separation between the top teams and the bottom teams. But I can tell you there's nothing built into the simulation where it has to be like that. In fact, you could all end up very tightly packed if you're all similarly proficient in the way you implement your decisions. And that's what I would like to see. So now let me tell you where you fit, if you will, in the simulation as you begin. Your business is profitable. I'll give you some numbers on that later. And you are selling shoes into the four major regions, which for the simulation are North America, Latin America, Asia Pacific, and Europe, Africa. You build two kinds of shoes. A branded shoe, so for example, it has Nike or Adidas on it. Everybody knows that's whose shoe it is. But you also build a no-brand shoe, if you will, for what they call the private label shoe. This is where you're contract manufacturing for, say, the Targets and Walmarts of the world. So it doesn't carry your company name on the label. It carries the Great Value name or the Target name or whatever. But it's a chance for you to manufacture more shoes and make more money. You will have six major competitors. There will be 7 teams because there are 7 teams in the class. And this is a very important point. The simulation is live play. The way it works, and I don't want to get too geeky into the way it works, is it looks at all your decisions and it apportions market share based on the competitive inputs of everybody's decision. And then based on that market share and the manufacturing decisions and all that stuff you make, determines how much money you make. So literally, if I had 2 courses instead of 1, the strategy that's just ripping things up in this class may perform horribly in this class. How could that be? Well, the competitors in this class have a different positions and are doing different things than they are in this class. So you may have talked to your buddies from previous years, and they may say, whatever you do, you got to do this or you got to do that. Let me tell you what you got to do. You got to make good decisions. And it's live play, so you just got to know what everybody else is doing determines what you're doing. A little bit more on the starting position. Last year, you sold almost 5 million shoes in the branded and just under 1 million shoes in the private label. You can see your revenues were a little over $200 million, and on that revenue you earned $25 million. So your profit margins are about 10%. Your credit rating was strong at a B+, which simply signifies that you were carrying some debt, but not an excessive amount of debt. And your SQ rating, that's like shoe quality rating, was 5 stars. The way you should view the SQ rating is kind of like an independent Consumer Reports sort of rating. So my point on this is, don't argue with the computer. When the computer says you've got a 6-star SQ rating, it's like everybody in the world will agree that your shoe is a 6-star quality rating. Shoes that are 7 or 8 stars are perceived as better quality. Less than 6 stars, worse quality than your shoe. It just is what it is. It's a very objective ranking of the shoe quality. So where sometimes you could say, well, brands, maybe one firm will argue their brand is better than somebody else's brand. In the game, it's very objective. What is your SQ rating in terms of the perception of your shoe and its quality? You have 2 factories, one in North America that can produce 2 million shoes annually, and one in Asia Pacific which can produce 4 million shoes annually. One thing I do want to tell you now is you do not shrink your way to winning this game. In other words, you cannot crawl into a hole and become a smaller shoe manufacturer and concentrate on a niche and win. Now I say that. I've seen companies shrink, not necessarily intentionally, and they've not done well. So maybe it's possible, but I want you to let you know up front that the market is going to grow fairly robustly. I'll talk about that more in a few slides. So that means your company needs to be ready to grow as well. Probably if you talk to the people who have played BSG before, they would tell you, you got to grow to win. And I think that's probably true, but you got to grow smartly. I've seen lots of first place, well actually I've seen all first place teams that have added a good chunk of capacity, but they added capacity because they had demand. I've seen lots of last place teams have a lot of capacity, and that's why they're in last place. They have capacity, but not at manufacturing capacity, but not enough demand to merit that, so they have tremendous cost disadvantages that really drag down their performance. Within the simulation, there are 3 distribution channels. There's the private label market, which incidentally is optional. You don't have to participate in the private label market if you don't want to. And then you have your branded sales through the internet. This is where you would go on to www.nike.com and buy your shoes directly from the manufacturer, which I don't really think you can do that with Nike. I think they put them all out through the retailers. But that channel exists in the simulation. And there's also the retail, where people go into various stores and they buy your shoes in stores. You'll see in the discussion the notion of channel conflict possibilities between the internet and the retail channel, based on if you price your internet shoes so low, the retailers won't want to stock your shoes because they'll feel like they can't make enough money, that you're already trying to sell them too cheaply over the internet. So you're going to have to manage that as well. What you're trying to do is to grow your firm smartly and maximize your profits. How you do that is, first of all, you've got to get your position, and it's got to be a position that will appeal to customers. For example, you cannot double the price of your shoe and go up to a 10-star and say, that's it, I'm running a very differentiated shoe, and my prices are double what everybody else's are. Because I can tell you, adding 5 stars above the average isn't worth doubling the price. In fact, as one little tidbit, usually when you add a star, it adds, usually you can afford to raise your prices maybe $1.50, maybe $2. That's it. So you've got to get the right position. And some of that has to do with where everybody else is going, but it also has to do with just getting the factors right so that you're selling your shoe. Keep in mind, in this simulation, and again, athletic shoes maybe aren't the best example of this. Maybe you could look at other things like the car manufacturing industry, where there are 7 companies that have largely the same positions. They just have to kind of tweak things around it. Same is true here. It's not necessarily all about being in a unique position. It's about getting in a position that everybody's not sitting in and then executing it well. Once you think you're got your position lined out, then you're always going to want to drive out cost whenever you can, because that's just going to maximize your profit. Again, consistent with your position without undermining your position. And then you're going to make some corporate decisions. You can issue more stock to raise money. You can buy back stock. You can have changed the dividend levels. You can pay loans off early. You can take out additional loans. And we'll talk about many of those things during the practice round. As far as grades for the simulation, there are 2 components to your grade. The first is just a performance component. Typically, the team that finishes on top gets 100% of the points, or almost 100%. Usually I don't go below 80%, so the team that finishes in last place gets about 80% of the points, and it's 125 points, so it's actually 100 points. Is 80% of 125? I think it is. It's pretty close to that. So that's the range that people fall into typically. I reserve the right, if somebody just is playing very badly, I don't think they're paying attention, to take them below the 80% threshold, but I've only had to do that a couple of times. But that's only half of the grade is the simulation performance. The other half is in the board of directors presentation at the end of the semester. So if a team doesn't do very well in the simulation, the board of directors presentation is the opportunity for them to come back and demonstrate that they've learned and they know how to give a high quality presentation, and that will substantially help their grade. Let me explain a few things about the simulation before we dive into some more of the nuances of it. It's all web-based, bsg.online.com. I tend to refer to the decisions as rounds. Round 1, and we have 7 rounds in the simulation. Each round represents a year, and so you're going to see that we start off in year 11. Year 11 is, if you will, the first year you're making decisions, which means we're going to continue up to year 17. As I've alluded to before, what happens is at the program deadline time, the computer takes everybody's most current decisions and then it compares your market positions and it apportions market share based on that. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. And then it looks at your underlying decisions after it apportions market share, and that's what's going to determine how much profitability you've got. For example, if you had a bunch of demand and you didn't manufacture enough shoes, well, even though your product was very demanded, your profitability is going to be severely hampered by the fact that you didn't manufacture enough shoes. Flip that one around. Let's say that you manufactured a lot more shoes than you needed. Well, it keeps those shoes in inventory for sale the next year, and one of the things that really hurts in the simulation is having excess shoes left over. I'll talk about this more during the practice round, but that can just really mess you up. Or you may have hit it just precisely that you got a strong market demand and you built exactly the right number of shoes, so you think you're looking good, but the reality is you don't have a decent profit margin built into the shoe. And so your profitability is pretty poor compared to your competitors, even though you've got a lot of demand and you've accurately forecast your demand. You get very detailed results, and we'll go through this after the practice round, and I'll walk you through this because, again, that's a huge part of what I want you to learn is how to take those results, how are we doing, why are we doing, and then determining how we're going to do better. And I've already said, 7 scheduled rounds, and we're going to have 2 practice rounds built in. I will make a video where I'm sitting at the computer walking you through the computer screens. But you make all of these decisions on a flash-based program. There is a tremendous amount of help available. To include, they've even started to put YouTube videos online. So often people will come and ask me questions, and the answer is really right in the help screen. Many times when people come and ask me a very detailed question, what they'll see me do is I will go right to the help screen and I will have to look it up, because I'm not going to kid you, this is a very complicated simulation, and the reason it's complicated is because it has excellent fidelity to real life. So this thing works like the business world works pretty well, which means it's not simple. So I often will go in and look up particular nuances when I'm trying to go, what's going on with that number? Why is that number out of line? What's included with that number? I go to the help screens. The run does automatically occur at the deadline, and you will get an email about 15 to 20 minutes typically after the deadline saying the results are ready. It's a whole new set of results, and you can see exactly how you did. As far as getting started, you're going to want to go to BSG-online. During the test, I've handed you a sheet with your registration codes. Everybody needs to register, just not one person per team. Everybody needs to register. And I'm sorry, they did just raise the price, and it's $43. It was $39 previously. But I think you're going to find that this is money well spent. All strategies, all positions, provided they're well executed, are viable. In this simulation, I guarantee you there is no magic sweet spot just waiting for you to discover it, which was true of many earlier simulations. That's one of the many reasons I like the simulation. I never have to just kind of look at people and say, well, that's what it's doing. What it does, it pretty much makes sense. Now, I figured out in the background some settings to tweak to make it, I think, make more sense, and I will be doing that. But you play what you see because it works, and don't think, oh, there's this secret thing going on. There's not. It's all about skillful execution. That gets into position, trade-offs, and fit. You're going to see some opportunities to shape your value chain, and how you shape your value chain, how well you shape your value chain, how well it fits with the position that you're trying to stake out is going to be key. There are trade-offs to be made in the simulation, and I can guarantee you, because you're smart people, the teams that finish towards the top, they will have made some smart trade-offs. The teams that finish towards the bottom probably made trade-offs that they didn't even know they were making, and if they turn out to be right, well, it's more because they were lucky. So how you perform in this thing is not luck. It's not a secret. It's not a hidden sweet spot. In the beginning, there's a lot of uncertainty as to what everybody's going to do. In the first year or two, there's a lot of movement and shaking out. But I've never, ever seen the simulation results basically not reflect how well people played the game and how well they understood what they were doing and they were doing the right thing. I told you that the way the computer works is it apportions sales based on how attractive your market product is. This slide tells you roughly how it does that. And you've got the big three that determine demand: your price, your quality, and the number of models, which is product line breadth. All three of these are really key. So you can say, hey, my shoe is cheaper than this other guy's and my SQ rating is 1 star better, but he's got more demand than I have. Well, check the number of models, because if you've got 50 models and he's got 500 models, that counts for a lot too. So don't forget the number of models is one of the big three. The other stuff down there are also big players. In fact, they can become enormous players. How so? What if everybody's kind of stacked on the same price, the same SQ rating, and the same number of models? Well, then they all wash each other out and there's no differentiation between any of the positions. So then what's going to matter? Well, things like advertising, rebates, that sort of stuff. The bottom one is customer loyalty. And what I mean by that is the one part of this game that is sticky is the number of retailers you have. The number of retailers you have depends on how much you sold the previous year, basically, and a few other factors. But that is, if you will, the lagging part of the game. You cannot go from deep in last place to first place in 1 year, because you just won't have the opportunity to sell enough shoes because you won't have enough retailers. So you have to go from last place to a much better position. You'll earn more retailers, which will then allow you to sell more shoes and go to a better position. You'll see references in the simulation manual to 3-year decisions. I don't do 3-year decisions. I'll talk about each of these decisions when I'm walking you through the screen. But in general, you're going to have to build the shoe, then you're going to have to price it and market it, then you're going to, when I say build the shoe, you're going to have to, I should say design the shoe, then you're going to have to manufacture the shoe with lots of decisions, and you're going to have to distribute the shoes, which is tied to where your plants are, and then you're going to have to do some corporate finance decisions. There also is a corporate social responsibility component to the game. There's 6 decisions there. All that influences is the image rating. Do not go overboard with corporate social responsibility. And again, I've already talked about lots of on-screen help. The last topic I'm going to talk about on this video is the scoring. I'm going to tell you the most important thing about scoring up front. If you make money, all of these things take care of themselves. If you're not making money, you can't put lipstick on that pig. You're not going to be doing well, with the exception of maybe your image rating anywhere else. So at the end of the day, it's about making money. Now, when you read the simulation manual, it has these 5 factors and apportions them equally. I changed that rating scale. Earnings per share is rated 20%. Return on equity is weighted 20%. Stock price I weight as 50% of the calculated score. Image rating is worth 10% of the calculated score. This is a key point. You say, oh, credit rating. Credit rating's not counted. I guess credit rating doesn't matter. Wrong answer. Credit rating matters a lot because it's going to affect your cost of borrowing. Why do I remove that from the simulation scoring? Because the one thing I didn't like about the way the simulation was scored is it just automatically gave you points for having an A+ credit rating. There's actually good reasons why you may not always want an A+ credit rating. So I really think that was the one bad part of the simulation. You may make finance decisions where you don't have an A+ or an A credit rating, and it's okay because it's consistent with your strategy, and I wanted to remove that from an explicit part of your score. If the lower your credit rating is, the more you'll pay in interest, to be sure. So it's not free, but I just removed that from the score. There's two components to it. There's how well you meet investor expectations, and then how do you rank vis-a-vis your competitors. In theory, everybody could get a maximum score on investor expectations, but probably everybody would not get a maximum score, or would not get the same score in the best in industry. If this seems kind of complicated, don't worry about it, because I go back to what's the most important thing. Make money. If you make money, these things magically take care of themselves. This year, they've just put into the simulation two particular bonuses: a bullseye bonus, which says that you were very accurate in forecasting several key parameters like revenue and earnings per share and those sorts of things, and a leapfrog bonus, which gives a 1 point bonus to the team that made the most jump from the previous year. These are new, they're small, just 1 point. I have no experience with them. I even have the latitude to turn it off, but I'm just going to see how it goes. So take a break. I'm going to come up for air and rest my tongue for a minute, and then we will come back and finish out our description of the simulation.